Good day. My name is Dave Cyr with National American University, and today I'll discuss the creation of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, how federal and statutory law, policy institutes, and special interest groups affected its creation and implementation. So let's get started. Before getting to the heart of political aspects of the Affordable Care Act, what is it exactly? The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act was legislation that was introduced by the Obama administration early in his first term as president. Both those for and against the law quickly deemed it Obamacare, and on its face, it seemed to finally put into law health care reform to which all would be entitled in the United States. The bill was enacted into law in March of 2010 and amended by the Health Care and Education Reconciliation Act a few days later. At the time, most aspects of the ACA were welcomed, but many thought it was an extension of too much governmental influence in the daily lives of American citizens. Particularly, the individual mandate caused the greatest concern, in that if one did not purchase health care through the ACA exchange network, a tax penalty would be levied. Many saw this as an opportunity for revenue rather than a motivator to purchase health insurance. The individual mandate was later nullified in a tax reform bill passed late in 2017 by the Trump administration and was remarked as the first step in repealing Obamacare. What federal laws affect the Affordable Care Act? First and foremost, what does the U.S. Constitution say about health care? Surprisingly little, in that the Constitution was drafted to protect the people from its government, not provide specifics like health care at the federal level. The Constitution is filled with verbiage empowering Congress to provide for the general welfare, but does Congress go too far in mandating individual coverage? This is not the first attempt at legislature to provide for a universal health plan. The Hill-Burton Hospital Survey and Construction Act of 1946 attempted to improve the general welfare of the U.S. population under President Truman. As the U.S. population increased, it was noted that a need existed for additional hospitals, especially in rural areas. While the law had merit, it was never fully realized in codified regulation until it was amended to become the Public Health Service Act of 1975. Many states have also made a commitment to improving the health of its populace, such as New York State passing its New York State Health Act, improving on the ACA, but at the state level with more access to insurance exchanges at all income levels. What can the President and executive branch do to improve health care in the U.S.? Primarily, the President will set his or her agenda for health care while campaigning for the office itself, and once in office, narrow the scope of such policies. This agenda is usually outlined in the State of the Union Address, which is a requirement of the U.S. Constitution. The President also has the ability to veto any bill presented before him and can enact certain executive orders which bypass Congress to enforce legislation. But by far the most powerful of the President's powers derived from the executive branch is the appointment of cabinet members who, most often, support the President's agendas and policies. While each appointment must be confirmed in Senate hearings, this is usually no issue if the Senate is controlled by the same party which elected the President. How does the judicial branch affect healthcare policy in the U.S.? In all aspects of law, the Supreme Court has the duty to interpret and apply the Constitution to ensure the American people are protected, and that the Constitution itself is protected from harm as well. No law can be passed which overrules the Constitution, and it is the job of the Supreme Court to hear cases which have merit and publish findings in accordance with the Constitution, thereby setting precedents for future courts to follow. In the case of the Affordable Care Act, the Supreme Court upheld the law's requirement for each individual to purchase health care, even though to many this was an overreach on the part of government to enforce its will on the individual citizen. Who else has a say in the formation on health policy? Policy institutes and special interest groups exist to sway public opinion and to conduct research to inform the general public about causes to which they are aligned. It is important to remember that all policy institutes and special interest groups have an agenda to which may or may not coincide with the public view or views of either political party. The goals of institutes and special interest groups are mainly to publish findings of their research to support their positions on a certain policy, conduct media campaigns to enhance that viewpoint, and use both to develop a persuasive argument in support of their agenda. If a political candidate agrees with the views of a policy institute or special interest group, money can be donated toward their campaign in the form of a political action committee or a PAC. Some examples of policy institutes and special interest groups include the American Medical Association, the American Red Cross, and the Centers for Disease Control. Who are the major stakeholders in how healthcare policy is shaped, enacted, and enforced? The general population desires to live longer, healthier lives, and employers have more productive workforces if they are healthier and do not lose valuable work time staying at home sick or laid off due to disability. When healthcare policy is in place and makes sense, hospitals can better respond to the needs of their patients, and workers in the healthcare industry are better able to apply their trade in caring for the sick and injured. While not in the forefront of anyone's mind while at the hospital or emergency room, most healthcare facilities in a capitalist society are in business to make a profit for their shareholders. There's nothing wrong with that as long as healthcare does not suffer at the expense of profits. Today I've discussed some of the federal laws and statutes that have an effect on healthcare policy, as well as how the U.S. Constitution is interpreted in healthcare reform. I've covered briefly how the judicial branch and the Supreme Court rule when cases are presented, and how judicial review is used to set precedents for future courts to use a basis for decision making. I went over policy institutes and how they and special interest groups leverage organization to affect policy making in healthcare, and how they inform the population on healthcare concerns. Lastly, I discussed some of the affected stakeholders and how they are impacted when policy is enacted and enforced. Again, my name is Dave Cyr. I hope this presentation has been informative. If you have any questions regarding any of the information which I have covered, I can be reached at the email address at the bottom of the slide. Thank you for viewing my presentation. Good day.